Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Mariah Choate from Wholistically Psyched. Mariah is a nationally certified school psychologist who worked in schools for many years. She's now home with her own two little ones, but she is still supporting students and families through Wholistically Psyched. She has a wonderful Instagram account, as well as a Teachers Pay Teachers shop and her own store, where she's able to provide resources for parents who are going through the special education process for their child. Mariah has seen the pitfalls of education and she understands how difficult it can be for parents when they are trying to work with schools and districts to get the services that their child needs. And she wants to make sure she is a bridge for you to help support you so that you know your rights, you know your child's rights, and you make sure that the schools and the districts are providing the services that your child deserves. After you listen to this episode, if you have any questions, please reach out to Mariah. She's on Instagram at holistically_psyched. You can also reach out to me. I'm on Instagram at Littles Love Learning Blog. Hey, Mariah, welcome to the Littles Love Learning podcast.
Hi, Erin. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited to chat with you today. We connected on Instagram, of course, and you were one of the speakers at our Learn and Play to K Kindergarten Readiness Virtual Conference, which we held a couple months ago. And I really wanted to get you on the podcast because your expertise in your area of influence is something that I am not super familiar with. I don't have a lot of information about this area. And so I was like, I have to get the expert, Mariah, on for my listeners so that they can actually understand this world of special education, IEPs, 504s, all of that.
Yes, you're so sweet. Thank you so much for saying that.
Of course. Well, before we dive into all of that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how you became a school psychologist, and sort of what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I've been working with kids for about 12 years. I started at 18. I was actually a school camp counselor, just like at a private company. And so I worked with kids from kindergarten through seventh grade. And then I transitioned to like a preschool role. So I was working with the little ones. I even worked with like 2 and 3-year-olds at one point at a private school. And I remember when I was working at a public school, I shadowed a school psychologist. She actually let me come in and like see some of her assessment stuff for when she was, assessing kids. And I remember I heard her talk on the phone with a lawyer and she was just like spit fire. And I remember thinking like, man, I want to do that. She's like advocating for these kids so well. So yeah, she just kind of brought me into that school psychology realm. So after that, I just started applying to grad schools and I started working as a school psychologist. I worked with like ECE and then I worked with elementary and I worked with middle school as a school psychologist. And my last year as a school psychologist, I was pregnant during that time. And unfortunately, I saw really difficult things happen within the district. So there was like, there were special education laws that were being broken and parents didn't know and admin knew very well. And HR asked me to kind of document what was going on. Little did I know that like it'd been going on for like 10 plus years. So they basically were like, document it all, submit it all to us. And then they basically said, so what? kids don't know, parents don't know, we'll keep it that way.
Oh my
And I remember just being so defeated. And I was like, and I'm pregnant and this is so stressful. So I decided to write a long letter to HR. And I said, this is what you asked me to do. This is all the laws that were broken. And you did nothing about it. Like you literally just washed your hands and students are struggling. And so I went on leave. So I decided not to come back. I put a resignation letter in. And then I got pregnant at 6 weeks when my youngest was 6 months old.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Had my babies like 14 months apart. And while I was pregnant with my second, during that whole year, so many people were reaching out to me. Like, what would you do in this situation? And like I was saying, I felt so free because I'm like, oh, I don't have like district over my head saying like, don't say this to that parent or make sure to say this in that meeting. Like people don't recognize that district actually does that. They'll literally say to the school psychologist, go into this meeting and make sure you don't approve that. Or, hey, make sure if this parent's throwing a fit about this, just like quiet them down with saying this or giving them this service. So I just felt so free to help people. So I started creating resources. And then I was like, I'll just post on Teachers Pay Teachers. And it kind of just took off from there. So I've been doing this since my second was born. So almost a year.
Wow. That's so awesome that you were able to take all of that experience and knowledge that you have and use it to go directly to the parents and help parents instead of having to go through all of the red tape that has to do with districts and admin. You're able to help the parents right at the source, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's been so freeing. It's been really nice.
And you also started an Instagram account to go along with those resources on Teachers Pay Teachers. So why don't you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so I made my first reel in like December. I think it's like the very end of December of 2023. And then January of 2024, I'm like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get good at reels. And I still look back and I'm like, they're terrible. It's like so silly. And then I think at about April timeframe is when I started doing memes and like using CapCut and doing like little cuts of like videos and stuff. And I think people just felt validated, like they understood, oh my gosh, like all this struggle and all this like frustration we felt in the school is actually real. It's not just like they keep telling us to quiet down or not feel frustrated, or they're doing the best that they can, which is very valid. A lot of schools do the best that they can. But I think people just felt like, oh my gosh, like someone from the inside is actually validating that like all this struggle is real. And people just, started liking stuff and sharing stuff. And so my account grew way faster than I thought it would.
Well, your reels are so funny. You have the best sense of humor and the way you're able to share knowledge. It's important knowledge, but you also do it in such an entertaining way that I'm not surprised that your Instagram has grown. I'm going to link it down below so everyone can check it out. But it is just so funny, some of the ideas that you come up with.
You're so sweet. Thank you. I think some of them are a little snarky, and I'm like, oh, I don't know about that one.
Like you said, it makes people feel seen, especially parents who have had those struggles with admin or school districts. And so it really is a place for them to go and feel community that they're not alone.
Right. That's a perfectly said. I think they feel that community. And I've literally had like hundreds of DMs of parents literally sending me like IEPs, sending me like videos of this is what's happened with my kid, or this is how they've mistreated my child or pushed me off or whatever. And I'm just so happy to be like, I'm happy that you feel like you can confide in me and know that like I know where you've been and I can try to help in any way that I can. I really feel like it's a humble honor, is how I feel really.
Well, you're becoming the school counselor of Instagram. And so people are going to be able to come to you for help and support, which is so awesome.
You're so sweet.
Now, at our conference, the Learn and Play Decay Kindergarten Readiness Conference, you did a wonderful presentation where you gave some brief overviews on the special education laws, because that is an area that most parents have no idea about, even as teachers. I mean, I took a law class, I think, about special education when I was in my bachelor's program, but it is not something that we are learning about constantly or that we're keeping up with. And so, as a school psychologist, that is your realm and you know this information. And so, will you just give us kind of a brief rundown or maybe a few areas that parents should know about?
Yes. So the most important special education law anyone and everyone needs to know is IDEA, so Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And there's so many processes that are covered under that umbrella law. So you think of a student that has a disability and maybe they don't have a medical diagnosis, but they're showing signs of struggling. Um, like the school psychologist can assess in that area and maybe see if they can fit under one of those eligibility categories. There's 13 of them. And so I think a lot of parents don't realize that, oh, my kid they weren't diagnosed with anything, so I can't do anything in the school. Well, that's not true. The school psychologist is going to see if they meet criteria or not. And then underneath that IDEA umbrella, there's going to be, LRE, least restrictive environment. So if your child does qualify for an IEP, it determines what placement they have, whether that's mild moderate placement or general education or behavior support, just things like that. And then it also helps rule out a 504 plan, which is for a student that might have a disability, like a medical diagnosed disability. So autism or Fragile X, or, type 2 diabetes. I've done like 504 plans for something as simple as diabetes and needing extra snacks and extra, time to go to the nurse, things like that. But yeah, that's my number one. Like everyone needs to know that law and get to know it really well. It's just frustrating because you can go look at it online and like look at the government website, but all the jargon is just so overwhelming. It's confusing. And parents walk away saying, like, I don't even know what I just read. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely. That's the hardest part is all of the jargon and it's so technical and it's
Yes.
not clear. So parents get super confused and they rely on their schools to relay the information and schools aren't always clear with relaying the information. So then it leaves parents in a bind.
Yes. And I remember I had a great professor through my graduate program, and she always said, if you can't explain things at an eighth grade level through an IEP, like you're not doing the job well. Because you have to think of like, there's some parents that don't know English, there's
Mhm.
some parents that maybe they never graduated from high school. Like the area that I work in is very much that type of population. It's a high foster care, high poverty area. And so I always would be reminded, and then I'd always check in with the parent, like, hey, I just said all of these crazy words. Like, what do you have questions about? Did this make sense to you? And I think as teachers or as admin, you don't always do that. I think you just get caught in the wheel and then you're just like, okay, on to the next. And it takes a
Yes.
lot of to like speak up and be like, wait, what do you mean?
Absolutely. I love that you would do that and give parents the chance to say, wait, I'm confused about this, or I don't understand this. Because, like you said, those meetings just go and everybody is speaking, and the parent might not feel comfortable. And even I know when I share things online about teaching reading, I can use that educational jargon sometimes and get caught up in that because when you're used to it and it becomes part of your everyday language, you forget that other people are not as obsessed with this topic as you are. Like, who isn't obsessed with phonemic awareness? Apparently, lots of people, but I'm obsessed with it. So, those kind of terms I can use without thinking. And so, you're right. We need to slow down as educators, anyone working in a school, when we're working with parents, and remind ourselves that they have their own careers, they have their own lives, they have so many other things going on. They're not as obsessed with the topic, possibly, that as we are, and to make sure
Right.
that it's super clear for them.
Yes. And to go back, an IEP, right, individual education program, that specifically falls under IDEA. So that main special education law, the only way you would qualify for an IEP is if, again, if you fall under those eligibility categories, there's 13 of them, and someone, a school psychologist, has to assess your child in various areas, like in their cognitive profile and their all different learning profiles. And a special education teacher also has to assess academically, and then they bring all that data together in an IEP meeting, and that's where they determine, okay, your child does qualify or your child doesn't qualify.
So, if a child doesn't qualify, what tips do you have for parents to move forward?
I just did a post on this morning. Yeah, so I always recommend, because parents forget that when they request in writing for an IEP, they should always put a little snippet of like, if they don't qualify, try to rule out a 504. So I kind of briefed it a little bit, but a 504 plan is different than an IEP. So an IEP is a specific, both of them are legal documents that follow the child through their schooling. But a 504 plan, you have to have a medical diagnosis. So there is eligibility categories or criteria, but it's specific to like the medical model, kind of. That's like a good way to think of it. So if a student has like autism, but maybe they're an average cognitive ability and they're not showing true needs in terms of like their disability is impacting their ability to access education, maybe they just have autism and it's presenting itself in a way that's not really impacting their education, they can still receive services and support in the school district, but it would be like transition times or presenting things simplified on a page when you give it to them, just like different different accommodations to curriculum, but never a modification. And you're not really following goals, you're not getting services like speech services, occupational services, none of that's covered under a 504. So that's where you want like parents that really want that support and show that their kid is struggling through school. And even with the support that the teacher gives, right? they're still struggling, that's when an IEP is typically warranted. So you get speech services, occupational services, there's different like PT even, or adapted physical education. You have specific goals that your child works through every single year. You can have modifications to curriculum. A big one parents don't know is you could be on a graduation track or you could not, right? You could be on just a high school diploma track where you're not necessarily meeting like GE requirements. And parents don't know that often in meetings. So that's why it's so important for parents to know, like, what are these goals leading to? What are the outcomes for the child? What are you hoping? And how are you keeping track of that progress? But yeah, so those are kind of the two main differences there.
Now, can parents request if their child does not qualify for an IEP one year, can they request the testing to be redone in a different year?
Even in the same year. So sometimes, sometimes parents, like I said, get a lot of pushback from the school, and they really don't, like, at the end of the day, they don't trust the testing. And I've talked about this before, but a person-centered approach, it's not done within the school district. So they think like, oh, my child fits all of this criteria that I'm looking at, and you're saying he's not qualifying, but like, I know that I see these markers and he struggles, right? So they can ask for an independent education evaluation. And so the school district has time to respond to say yes or no. Typically they say yes. Sometimes they get a different school psychologist within the district to give the same assessments, but like, you have assessment batteries, right? So you're not going to give the exact same test because then that's not valid, but you're going to give different tests within that battery. And it's going to hit the same like cognitive and learning profiles to determine eligibility or not. Or you can ask them to hire an outside evaluator. So like, I know personal people that are like private school psychologists, and they contract with the district. So they'll take all their IEEs, that's what they call it, an IEE. And they'll give a separate assessment. It's kind of like an unbiased approach of someone that's completely removed from that school district. They're just, just looking at this child kind of from an outsider point of view. And it helps parents feel, more comfortable to know like, okay, this is unbiased, data. And then like I said, a 504, so recommending that they rule out a 504. And then if they don't feel comfortable, asking for an IEE. And then just following progress through really working with the teacher. So asking the teacher, because right, you could give accommodations or supports to one student one year, and then the next student, or like the next year, they go on to a different teacher, and the teacher might not give the same support. And maybe they were thriving in your class, but then they move on the next year and they're all of a sudden failing. And it's not really that the child is all of a sudden struggling. It's just that support was removed that was really beneficial to them. So that's why it's so important for like teachers to be in contact with parents to follow, okay, this is what support helped my child. Let's continue that through the next school year. And that's all through like the response to intervention, or like the RTI approach that they should be using in schools.
Yes, absolutely. And that schools and parents are working together on these goals. I love how you mentioned that parents really need to be keeping track of this, because how many IEP meetings will a parent have in a year?
Just one usually, unless they call
Just
for
one.
more. Yeah.
Just one. And so I'm just thinking of parents who have that one meeting and they're like, yes, these are my child's goals. The school's going to be working with them on these goals. If you are not advocating for your child and keeping up with, are they working on these goals? What services are they getting? How are they improving? It's very easy for kids to fall through the cracks. And all of a
Yes.
sudden you find out that they haven't been receiving these services as often, or they haven't been getting these supports in the same way that they should have been. And
Yeah.
as a parent, you really have to stay in the driver's seat of that.
Yes. And little tidbit on that again, no one talks about, but everyone sees it within the school, is quality of services. So one of the issues that I had with one of the special education teachers that HR wanted me to literally observe and like document on is quality of services. So if there's a goal of like, oh, say this fifth grader is reading at, I don't know, a fourth grade level, and then I go in and I'm just happy to talk to the special education teacher, and they're having them read
at a second grade level or test on a second grade level to assume that they're meeting all those goals and meeting all the things that they're working on. It's really difficult. As a parent, you really have to trust that, like, okay, the school has my best interest and my student's best interest. And you can trust that, but at the same time, verify, right? Trust, but verify all the time.
Wow. I can't believe that. To think that that could be happening, but you're right. I love that. Trust but verify. You're working in support with this school, but it's your child. You're going to
Yes,
be the one who needs to advocate for them every year. They're going to be at a different school, they're going to graduate eventually. You just need to make sure that you know what's going on.
right, exactly. Yeah.
Now, many of the listeners of this podcast are parents or teachers of the little ones. So we have preschool, pre K, and kindergarten. And so maybe some are not even in this world yet, but they're starting to watch their child's development and they're starting to pay attention. So, can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of those milestones and paying attention to that early development?
Yes. So in the Learn and Play Decay presentation, I had all the links to the CDC website for really monitoring your child's milestones. And that's not a super comprehensive list, but it gives you like really good indicators, I think from birth to age 5. And I also have a free resource actually that talks about like the milestones and the academic milestones after age 5 per grade level. But really, you should just be watching your child's development, seeing how they are comparing, but not in a sense of like, my child's struggling with this, they shouldn't be. But more so, when I look at other kids their same age, are they as social? Are they as communicative? Are they communicating verbally? Are they communicating non-verbally? Are they throwing fits a lot more? Are they, eating typical foods, or do they have preferences? Or how's their sleep patterns? You're kind of looking at a holistic approach and then looking at other children that might be the same age or the same development, and seeing if your child's kind of on par, or if they're starting to struggle in different areas. And if they are struggling in different areas, you can talk to a pediatrician. You can even get early services. So our biggest thing in school psychology is always early intervention, right? So as a parent, you have full freedom to go to an agency like Los Angeles, Los Angeles Regional Center is like closest to us. But there you could talk to your pediatrician, talk to a regional center or like an early intervention. That's all free. And again, kind of like with the school, you can call them, say, hey, I have these concerns about my child. Can you give an assessment? And it's going to be a similar assessment to the school, but it's going to be like more detailed to because there's different criteria for younger kids. But they could say, yeah, they qualify, or no, you had these concerns and that's okay. We assessed and they don't qualify. But again, it's all free. It's still covered under that IDEA that I talked about, that main educational law, all free to the parents. And if they do qualify, they're able to get speech services. It's kind of like an IEP, but they call it something different. But they get a plan so that when you go to school and you start public education, you say, my child has received XYZ services, they have this plan in place, they were maybe delayed in XYZ areas. And then you tell your teacher, you tell the school psychologist, you email them, you say, this is what my concern is. You give a written notice and say, I want to see if they qualify for an IEP in this setting. And you can start that all right away. All of that is early intervention.
That's amazing to think that you could head into kindergarten with this plan and saying, I'm ready for my child to receive services instead of having to wait and wait and wait for the school to get on board. You would come in with that information.
Right. Yeah. And I know personally because my nephew did that. He was delayed. He had some birth trauma. And so again, it goes way back to like when they were born. He had birth trauma and he had hypotonia. So it's like low muscle mass. And then he had speech delay. And so he received all of the appropriate supports, got to, elementary, and then didn't need an IEP, didn't require those supports because he got the early intervention. So again, he's actually in the gifted program now that I'm thinking about it. So yeah, like you just never know, but you just do your due diligence, right, as a parent to try to advocate when you can.
Yes. And I love that you brought that up because sometimes online, I feel there can be some pushback about pushing kids too fast or too far when it comes to development. And every kid develops on their own speed, and we shouldn't even worry about these milestones. And I think for us as educators, school psychologists, what we are saying is We're not trying to push your child too fast, too far, but it is
Yeah.
important to make sure that they're meeting those milestones because of that early intervention piece. If
Yeah.
you don't intervene early, it's going to be so much harder if they're struggling later on. So it's not to be a stressful situation, it's not to make parents feel anxious, but it is definitely something to be aware of and be curious about. And the fact that these services are free, take advantage of them, because if you do go the private route, it is very expensive for the testing and for the services. So if you can take advantage of what is free, we definitely recommend that.
For sure. And I always encourage parents, because school psychs are going to hate me right now. I always recommend to parents, once I became a parent, especially, like, you have concerns, you can have those concerns and come to a professional and trust, hopefully, right? Trust that they're going to be the ones to decide where to go next and whether they qualify or not. It's not your job as a parent to know whether your child qualifies for an IEP or not. It's not your job. It's your job to say, I see these concerns and I want to do something about them early so that they don't continue on to affect later years, right? And they don't affect my kid hating school by fourth grade, right? So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so I always encourage parents, and when they would ask, like, oh, I want to get an IEP. I know everyone tells me I need to stop asking, but I know something's wrong. And I'd always encourage them, you're doing your due diligence as a parent. That's it. Let the
Yes,
professional assess and take it from there, and we'll see what happens.
that's such good advice. And just like you said, even if they don't qualify, you don't want their self esteem to be affected or their confidence in themselves because of struggles. You want to know what is going on and get them that help in advance as early as you can so that when they are, like you said, in fourth grade, they haven't had all of these years of struggling. You were on top of it and you knew what was happening. And even if they don't qualify, at least you went down that route to make sure.
Right. And you get an insight into their learning profile. So, like, let's say your kid doesn't qualify, you're able to see, like, oh, is their phonemic awareness like on par with others their age? How are they rated in that area? Or maybe their visual, visual processing. Maybe they struggle in that area, but not struggling enough to like be a real deficit. So you're able to see their strengths and you're able to see where you can support better, even if they don't qualify.
Yes, we all love learning more about ourselves. How many of us have taken those quizzes online to learn more about ourselves? So it's the same thing. We love learning about our kids. We love learning that information on how they learn, how they are taking in that information and which areas maybe they're struggling with. I know that is a really good point. So even if nothing comes of it in terms of an IEP, you will still have that information and data for you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Now, you mentioned a few times that you have resources for parents and for other educators to learn more about this. So, will you tell us a little bit about your shop?
Yes. So on my Teachers Pay Teachers, I have all of my 44 resources listed like separately. And then on my Instagram, on my Stand store, so like the link in bio, I have my Google Drive, which has access to all of those resources, but on a Google Drive. So I share it with you and you have access. Or you can buy the IEP guide, which is a 74-page document. And then even on some of the pages, I think on like 5 or 7 of the pages, there's clickable links to other documents. So it's like a whole thing. But it helps support your student from like early intervention to the IEP. And then I also have a behavior guide, and that's specifically for educators or parents learning how to support their child in the school setting. And also to make sure that if your child does have a behavior plan or a behavior intervention plan or a functional behavior assessment, those are like those IEP specific behavior supports. It makes sure that there's examples in there and that whoever's doing your reports or assessments, that it's legally defensible, that it fits all of like what is required, like by state law. At least in California, we're like one of the biggest behavior states. And so it fits like California standard of what should be an FBA or a BIP. And it helps just like provide support for anyone who's providing those behavior supports.
Well, I'm going to make sure to link to your store below so that people can check out what you have to offer. Because if you're a parent and you're listening to this and you're about to head down this road with school starting soon and your child may or may not be on this road of getting evaluated, you definitely want this information. It's so important to put it in your toolbox so that you're going to be prepared for whatever is to come as your child goes through school.
Thank you so much.
Well, Mariah, this has been so much fun. As we wrap up, I always ask my guests the same question. This is called the Littles Love Learning podcast. So, what do you love about working with littles?
So I think the old saying of like kids say the darndest things. I think that's like my favorite part about working with littles is you just never know. Like every day could be the same routine and yet it's different every day because kids say the darndest things.
They do.
It's the
We used
sweetest.
we used to say about parent teacher conferences when parents would come in, we would say, anything that's going on in your house, we know about it. And it's probably the
Yep.
funniest way that your child came into school and told us about it.
Yes. And it's just funny the way that they explain things or, I've had even when I was like I was like 20 years old, I remember, and there was this little kid that one of the other teachers I was working with was pregnant. And every day, it was like every day for a week, he'd come up to me and be like, "So are you having a baby too?" And I was like, I can't even take offense because like kids are just
Yeah.
curious. They're like,
Yes.
"Oh, everyone's having a baby." Uh, Kids are just so sweet. Very funny.
That's adorable. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Why don't you let all the listeners know where they can connect with you online? And I'll make sure to put all the links down below.
Yeah, so my Teachers Pay Teachers store is the Holistically Psyched. And then on Instagram, it's a little bit different. It's holistically_psyched. And really, I started that just to provide a holistic approach to psychology and education when you're approaching, students and their learning needs. But yeah, and my stand store is accessible through my Instagram as well.
Okay, perfect. I will put all of that below. Mariah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Erin.